It's 6 o'clock, February 4th, 2020. This is the Public Works, Public Utilities meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Oh, I guess you, oh, never mind. I was here at one point. He's here the
Let the record show everybody's here.
I don't know what just happened, my apologies.
All right, quick order of business. We have to elect a chair and vice chair, so we'll take any nominations for chairperson.
Nominate Mr. Jones for the chair.
Is there a second?
Aye.
I accept. Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Appreciate it, guys. We need to nominate a vice chairperson. Any
Nominate Mr. Hoffman for vice chair.
I second that. Do you accept, Mr. Hoffman?
I accept.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes. All right. Item 3 is approval of motion summary for the meeting on August 6, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second?
I second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hoffman?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes. Item 4 is anything that the public would like to talk about. It's not on the agenda tonight. None?
Off the record, I have $5 for George's lottery fund.
We're going to keep that on the record. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, discussion of transportation needs and funding. Mr. Farino.
I'll take that, Mr. Chair, thank you. Assuming this works tonight, we'll run through this presentation. It's only about 6 or 7 slides. We talked a lot last night about transportation issues. Elaine, is this one quickly here?
Yes, I'm just trying to get Tom in here, sorry.
Okay, so we talked about roadway maintenance program and what the purpose is, and really we talked about is taking care of what we have. Fix it first, ODOT called it. Just taking care of our existing streets, our existing infrastructure out there. The list in gray points out, I think there was a question last night about what specifically would any additional funds go towards when it comes to maintenance. Those are the items right there. The first one's the big one, roadway paving, patching and potholes. That's taking care of the asphalt in the streets. Everything else are things listed in this document, which I believe you were provided a draft copy of. There'll be a final version coming out. All the programs are listed in here. Those are the programs largely that are handled by staff, everything below the top line, through our staffing operations in traffic and in streets. The top line generally is handled, the paving, through contract every year. Those, in sum, are our annual maintenance, roadway maintenance program.
Real quick, Bill, when
Yeah.
you do contracts, does that go to bid, or is that,
Yes.
okay?
Yep, the paving goes to bid. On some of these other items, like for example, street lighting, or the pavement markings, it's a fairly large contract, so that will go to bid too. Guardrail projects could go to bid, because we do have several contractors out
Do
there.
you see a
who
lot of
work.
variation in the contract award, or is it typically the same people seem to come in?
No, there's probably a half dozen paving
Okay.
contractors in Central Ohio who get almost all the work.
Okay, I'm just curious.
So the roadway, this is the slide we wanted to show last night, and we'll show it now. There's the 3 components of the roadway maintenance program. The first is traffic maintenance. The funding is at $430,000 this year. What we'd say was if we had another $45,000, we'd be at what I think is a sustainable level. That's based on all the metrics captured through our traffic engineer to manage the programs for street lights, street paving, signage, traffic signals, and guardrail. So we're really close on that program in terms of having a robust amount of money to take care of traffic maintenance. The second component, street maintenance, that's the work that Charles Dukes and his crew does. That's the winter snow and ice, the pothole patching, base repairs, berm repairs, and any concrete work we do out there. So again, you can see we're at $855,000 in the budget this year, and we would like to be at around $1.2 million per year. So a deficit of just under $400,000. Again, in this document, it's a lot more specific about all the programs that make up the street maintenance component. And the third, and probably the most significant, is the street paving program. We're just over $1.8 million. And I did remind the committee last night, too, that $650 of that is contingent on OPWC grants and Delaware County Engineer grants. Together, those two this year total $650,000 of that $1.8 million. So really our local funding is at like 1.2 is what we have to put into the programs every year. But we'd like to increase it by 1.1 to 1.2 to get us up to a $3 million a year program that would allow us to pave our local streets, collectors and arterials, and include maintaining our alleys. Right now, the only maintenance we do in alleys is pothole repair. And the alleys, in most cases, are the only public roadway into a properties where their garages are. But our current code has alleys as a we'll fix the potholes, but the residents have to put the money together to get it fixed. I personally, not sure I agree with that, but that's just how it is right now. But a proposal would be, if we did ask for more funding, would be to find a way for us to take care of the alleys also. And again, in the other document, I think with about $50,000 of funding available to our streets maintenance crew, we could go ahead and maintain all the alleys in the city as well.
Well, I had this comment for, member comment, but this is exactly what it's about. I got a complaint today about an alley at 28 South Sandusky. I guess it's the alley behind the new music store that goes, the alley that goes to the city parking lot. Apparently there's 2 potholes about the size of basketballs in there. Is this the we would fix then?
If that alley,
I can't get a grip of where it's at. We're talking about
I gotta think that's the alley on, if it's 28 South Sandusky, it's gotta be
28
behind it.
28 South Sandusky.
It's gotta be the one that's actually off of West William Street.
The one next to the hair salon.
Yeah,
It says,
And Lawrence
right by
Lawn.
the new music store with a white concrete block storage building.
I think that's the south.
The alley is also access to a city parking lot.
Yeah, that's the alley that's off of William Street. And all alleys right now, we look at the adjoining abutting property owners
Okay,
and ask, if it's a pothole, we'll go out and take care of it. So we'll answer your question immediately. We'll go take care of the potholes on that
Okay.
alley right away.
okay,
But repaving the alley would be thrown into that larger
okay.
pile.
Now, these are just 2 potholes that she's saying it's the size of the basketball, so.
No, we'll
I just
take
brought
care
that
of
up because you were talking about alleys.
Appreciate that. So the 3 red numbers together add up to $1.6 million of funding gap that we say right now, based on this year's funding. And again, included in that is the fact we have OPWC grant funds in that available to us. So that's how we came up with that $1.6 million that we talked about last night.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So it says it does not include costs associated with additional staff.
Yes. that
Any idea what, in a ballpark, that would be, the additional staff cost?
Well, staff member is around $70,000 to $80,000 per year.
Okay.
And what we pointed out in the past is that Public Works, Streets, and Traffic Operations are acting at the same staffing level they had back in 2000. So although we're adding a staff member in the budget this year, we're actually dropped below our 2000 levels in staffing, and we're trying to creep up back to the level that we were at 2000, but we haven't increased staffing as maybe the fire department or the police department has over that time. So there is no, in this 1.6, it's not including staffing.
Any idea about how many additional staffers you need, to get to where we'd have a, it's not just money, you need manpower to run a sustainable maintenance program.
Right, well, since 2000, we've been reliant on temporary summer help, is the only way that we can get the job done. And we hire 4 members in the street division and 4 members in the traffic division. So that's a lot of staff. Our total staffing for those 2 is 11 men. And we're bringing in 8 more just to, when we actually can do the work, April through October.
That's the street division.
In street and traffic together,
You're going from, that's under Dukes, right?
under Dukes and Jessica
That's
Omoy
going
to the
from 8
traffic.
to 11?
8, we are, 11 is the total full-time we have in those 2 divisions.
Okay.
And we add additional 8 seasonals, full-time
Okay, but
seasonals.
no more full-time though, just seasonal.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. So typically, if we took half that number of seasonal positions and turned those into full-time staff and devoted some to traffic and the rest to streets, it would probably get us closer to the levels that we should be at this point.
I've heard that before.
Yep. And, but we're not there, so what ends up happening is we have limitations on how much work we can get done in the summertime, because when you account for vacations and sick leave and things like that, we just don't, with just 7 men on one, you don't have enough to run 2 full crews full-time.
Mhm.
And until we can get to that point, we can't be as effective out there. We have the machinery, And we can put plenty of money to buy asphalt and concrete, but if we don't have 2 full crews, then we're still limited. So this next slide here, I just want to talk about why do we have this big funding gap, and just run through some reminders we talked about. There's a difference in asphalt cost in 25 years, 300% increase. It's one of the more, of construction materials, that one has increased probably more so than even steel or wood products or gypsum board or even stone locally. Asphalt, because it is petroleum-based,
Okay.
we end up with a much higher increase there. Also, we've had 103 miles in 95 and 171 miles in 20. We've added enormous amount of mileage. And you can see on the bottom chart, the majority of that mileage is in the local roads. That makes sense, that's what we're building, is all these subdivisions. We keep adding these streets. Then the next highest category are collector roads, and those are largely just the bigger local roads.
That's the Lexington Glens.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you consider arterial?
Arterial would be a street like London Road,
Okay,
Pennsylvania Avenue.
okay.
And then US 23 has been stable. The only thing that's changed with that is ODOT policy that puts more and more burden of maintaining state highways that run through local jurisdictions upon that jurisdiction. So we do end up with cost in 23 in terms of maintaining that guardrail, pothole patching, crack sealing. Crack sealing half of 23, half our responsibility is $20,000 cost to the city. So all those things have cost, but you can see the difference. 66% increase in roads in 25 years. It's a large burden. Also, we have just the appurtenances. We add in the street lights. Back when I started here, we had just started the new period street light program. We're just putting in a few hundred, and now we're over 2,500 of those street lights. Every one of them has bulbs, ballast, gets hit by vehicles, has electrical problems. And so those have added a burden into the city in terms of taking care of those and maintaining those. And our traffic signals, we've doubled the number of traffic signals in town also. And those have a lot of component parts that wear out. Software, computers become outdated, have to be replaced. So those add into the program costs. So I've talked about this before. I think you were provided the list, but we have over 100 residential streets that are now poor. And that's outside of us having a sustainable program. Those are roads that have gotten away from us and should have been paved anywhere from maybe a year ago to several years ago or longer. And you're familiar with a number of the streets, you've probably driven them. If you drive a road like Bridgeport or Providence, it's very easy to see how bad these streets
What's
are.
that percent of total roads then?
We're going to recalculate that number for you. I don't want to just throw out a random number now. It's significant.
Is there anything under poor?
Poor, we've gone to good, fair, and poor.
Okay,
So poor could be anything from, at that point where you really should pave it this year because it's deteriorated that far, to roads that are just so far gone. Example of far gone might be a Slack Road and Old Fraley Road that are just almost a gravel road again. Obviously, those roads require more towards $4 to $5 a square foot to restore, where roads that are just on that cusp of preventative maintenance doesn't help anymore, we need to resurface it. We could probably do that for $2.25 per square foot.
Do you have that, probably for Corey's benefit, do you have that increasing cost over time graphic that you've given us multiple times in the past to show how those costs escalate once once that maintenance gets away from us?
I don't have it with me tonight, but I'm glad to resend that out to the group here. Thank George for that. It does show, basically, as roads deteriorate, a local street, over the first 10 years or so, it stays very stable, in very good shape. Micro cracks develop, then between the year 10 and year 15, you really have to get out there, do crack sealing operations, slurry sealing operations to keep that surface real tight. And around the year 20, the condition of the road starts falling off fairly quickly. And will fall off between the year 20 and 30 very drastically in terms of the condition. Then after 30 years, it starts to level back out to, well, it's just an alligator piece of pavement at this point. And there's not a lot of further deterioration, but the damage is done. Once your surface is so opened and cracked, water infiltrates through with every rain like today. In the wintertime, you get a lot of frost heave, a lot of freeze thaw cycles, a lot of water in there, just breaks the road down to the point where you end up replacing typical mill and fill would like to replace 1.5 inches, 2 inches of asphalt. When it gets to that point, you're probably replacing all the asphalt, maybe 5 or 6 inches of asphalt. That's where your costs tend to double and triple on taking care of streets. But the graph will show, will give an example of how the failure mechanism on a typical road happens for asphalt pavement. And then these slides are really just how do we get to where we need to be? And the first thing is obviously I've been saying is fix it first, prioritizing our maintenance. The city's been talking in a number of different documents and formats for 2 decades that we got to make a priority of taking care of our roads. And then bottom shows what I've been talking about, local streets, if we could pave them once in 25 years. 20 years for collectors and 15 years for arterials. If it's a state route arterial, it becomes a 10-year cycle through the ODOT Urban Resurfacing Program. But our arterials, we shoot for 15 years, like our London Road, South Sandusky, streets like that. We try to get to that. If not, we may be at 13 or 14 years on those. But we do put most of our effort towards arterials because they're larger roads. It's a lot more pavement to have to take care of if it goes in a worse condition than right that cusp of getting from fair to poor. So that's one of the goals right there is to fix what we have first, and it's more than just the streets. There is taking care of guardrail when it gets hit, and traffic signals, and our street lights, our pavement maintenance, striping, signage. Like I said, those are smaller costs, and you can see from the slide in the beginning, there's not as much. All those things wrapped together are $400,000 and some a year, where pavement is $3 million a year approach. The second part of getting there is obviously one of the things we've been talking about, establish adequate funding sources to close that gap. And I think we talked about it last night, a funding source that as the city grows or as income grows, it increments up as well. So we don't have to keep reestablishing a gap. The funding source is adequate. The 2 quotes on the bottom are right out of the infrastructure maintenance plan. That was the work between 2000 and 2002. And they basically said 3 things actually. The first was take care of our roads. We've got to start maintaining them. And there are two points regarding where seek additional tax specifically dedicated to infrastructure maintenance and consider the elimination of the tax credit. Those are the 2 things that were looked at back in 2002, thrown out there as things to move forward. I don't really think either one of those at that point went real far. In 2003, there was a general levy for the city, but it was more of a city capital improvement. It was a very big, large levy that included not just roads, but buildings and anything else we could throw in there, and that didn't work. Following that, had a fire levy, was very focused and worked. Then we had a very focused parks levy that worked. In 2016, our levy went out there for infrastructure, but again, I talked last night, it was probably too broad. There's a lot of confusion over a lot of the projects, and some people just thought, why don't we just focus on what we think our affordable problem is, our streets, and we're not as interested in new linkages and new connections and things like that. We're more concerned about the existing street in front of my home. So that's the information that it's kind of expanded on what we talked about last night, and I don't really want to, I want to answer questions. I don't need to dwell on it. I think we have it, and I'll continue to provide the most updated versions of all these documents. We're trying to get them all updated this year and having good information out there. And anything that you remember from the past you thought might be helpful in terms of explanation or documentation, I'm glad to get it out to this group and out to council. I believe my role is to just continue to sound the horn on maintenance, because I think that's our priority as a city. If we never built another road again, we've got all this existing roadway and related infrastructure that is our burden to take care of. And we're not going to find a mechanism to have the county or private development or new developers pay for those things. It's up to this community to figure out how to do that. And at this part, we do a pretty good job stretching dollars as far as we possibly can within our existing staffing, but you can only take $1 and stretch it so far when you're trying to pave a road.
Great. Any questions for Bill?
I just want to touch on a little bit what Lisa was getting at last night's meeting. So you talk about your general rule where you want to repave a road in 25 years. So it's like, when you have a business, they have a useful life of, say, an asset of like, say, a piece of carpet. And they put it in a rental, say they've got a 15-year useful life, but if that general rule really changes if, say, they've got, I don't know, maybe you rent it out to a college house and they have a bunch of parties there, and you gotta end up having to replace the carpet before its useful life. Is there any kind of calculus beyond that general rule, like when you add X amount of residents or X amount of traffic, that changes that to where maybe a street like Hawthorne, for example, in my ward, where maybe when it was first created, you didn't imagine this Coughlin Corners coming in, and maybe now you're gonna have a lot of people coming up Liberty Road and wanting to cross to get over there. Does that change, something like that, change the calculus of when you wanna pave a road?
It wouldn't, that's a good example. That's a road that is designed as a neighborhood collector, but it could become more arterial if it carries a significant amount of traffic because of that. So that would certainly change the characteristics of how quickly the road deteriorates. In general, no, road pavement will last 20 to 30 years in a lighter traffic situation. 20 years if you don't do anything to it. You don't do crack sealing operations, you don't take care of any pavement preservation. You can push that envelope further out to 30 years if you do those things. We don't have the funding right now to do a robust pavement preventive maintenance program.
Okay.
So those are the things that really matter. So when I say 25 years, that's our target life cycle. If you look at Providence or Bridgeport, those were roads that were built under 30 years ago, and they should have been paved, those roads should have been paved probably close to 10 years ago. That would have put them around just over 20 years old. So different pavements last. Now, we did make a fairly significant change in our pavement section. And when I say section, I mean how much asphalt, stone underneath, around 1996, after I got here. That's made a good difference in terms of these roads that should last 25 years. We hope to get 25 years out of them. The road sections that are falling apart in our newer subdivisions, when I say newer, built pre-95, it wasn't the best pavement section, and so we're seeing those roads fall apart at a faster rate. So I guess what I'm getting at is there's so many parameters when it comes to roads, you have to somewhat talk in generalities, and to get budget estimates, you have to make certain assumptions, and so we've targeted kind of the mid-range of a life expectancy for those different roads, and that's where the 15, 20, and 25 numbers come from.
Any other questions? All right. Item 6 is update and discussion relating to public utilities.
Need your card. One second. This is
Crossed.
where,
Yeah,
this is
don't
where it
break
went
it.
wrong.
Guys, cross them, cross the fingers.
This is when it all went downhill last night.
Right, it's all good then?
We're doing good.
I did, yeah, you did great. So I just want to, the items are listed, but I do just want to talk on a couple projects that we have going on. The first one going on right this moment, that's a picture from yesterday. I took it, put it in there and sent it to Elaine. So this is Dogwood Drive stormwater culvert project. Dogwood Drive being backside of Kroger on 23 South, Wendy's, et cetera. So what they had, I'll go to the next slide. So what they had was a ravine that was starting to erode very heavily. And you can see how close it is to the houses themselves. It was starting to approach the houses. We have a number of, you can still see them even with the project going on, downspouts that are just hanging currently in the air because that's how far it was approaching their houses. It was seen as something that maybe was, it was an experimental project or installation of storm sewer methods when that development was built. It wasn't a good one. We won't go back to doing it quite that way. So it was starting to carve out very deep and expand. So what we've done is we've put in piping. And so this is their backyards are now going to have this large flat area. It's you know, I heard a complaint yesterday, so am I going to have to mow all that? Well, no, sure. Keep it unusable. I don't really care, but it'll just absorb water faster if you don't mow it. But so you can see how in that flat area there's windows on those storm receptacles. Water can make its way in. Going, you know, that's a little bit further back. You can see again how close it really was getting to those people's houses. It was a item of necessity. It's it's looking fantastic, though. I couldn't be happier with how it's coming together as a project. And then you can see, so that's the outfall on the right that's coming from the backside of Kroger, that parking lot, et cetera. And so this is just gonna spill into that common way. Once the contractor is done, we're gonna come in and we're gonna muck out this area a little bit to make sure the flows go where they should go. But again, we're creating a really good solution here for the residents, and really, they're all quite happy. That's on the upstream side. That was yesterday. They've actually got the pipe today almost all the way to, you can see where the steel is for the last head wall, or the upstream head wall that's gonna be going in. So they're moving very quickly. 2 to 3 weeks, this will be done. It'll need a little bit of final grading. Spring, we'll come back and do some overseeding, but all in all, this one ended up being a win. I wanted to show that to you guys. The same contractor also won the next contract, so as soon as they're done there, they're jumping over here. So here we're on Stratford Road. Bill, what's the business there on the left? Do you know? Can you think of that?
It's the durable equipment, supply of Havens Road. I forget, I do forget.
Yeah.
That's where Simmer Roofing used to be.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So what you have is, working with ODOT, as we have to do when it comes to the culverts underneath of 23, and then we took on the portion underneath Stratford, but those storm culverts were lined, 2016 or so. A side effect of them being lined is the storm water traveling through those culverts is going much faster. So it started eroding out this stream that travels through 845 Stratford Road's property, to the point that it actually even just this last end of 2019, a tree fell over that's near it and landed on their car. So this project was meant to take away some of that energy that was created from the culvert lining. So at the end, the pipe would be coming on the left, and what they're creating is a large concrete basin, and then it has large 3.5-foot concrete obstacles. Basically, it's taking the impact of the water, and then it slows down to normal flows. So again, that'll start in the next month or so. And I think it's going to be good for that homeowner. That homeowner, I just want to say, has been absolutely fantastic through this whole process. I mean, project CIP, budgeting, planning, et cetera. It takes a few years to get stuff going, as you know. So they've been wonderful. Even when the tree fell, they were understanding that the process is happening, and it was, they've been great. And lastly, so I'd written up a informational docket for you guys recently that Tom had sent out on one of his Friday emails. I wanted to see if there were any questions from you guys as far as that was concerned. I did, since that email, I did go back and find that the city of Delaware did, between 2013 and 2015, in that time span, we had tested for 6 different PFAS compounds within our water supply. None were found at that time. That was part of the UCMR 3 testing, which is the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. So it was the 3rd round of that. Just, they had no regulations on these chemicals, but they're just testing to see if they're in there. And so the last round of that, we found nothing. Whenever the EPA gets to us, basically this year, we'll be testing again, except this time they'll be testing on our effluent, what's coming out of the plant. And so that's what they're going to be looking for this year. Even if they do find something in our supply side, I'm fairly confident in the city's ability to treat that, because those were some of the considerations taken into account when the new plant was being designed. Reverse osmosis is a known treatment for many of the PFAS compounds. Our nanofiltration membranes are tight enough of a weave to be considered reverse osmosis. So we have a good head start as far as this is all concerned. So I'm fairly optimistic about how this is all going to go. But I just wanted to make sure that got put out there, and I didn't know if there would be anything on your minds from that email. So no, I'm golden.
Any questions? Great.
I just want to say that I live on Dogwood Drive, right down the street from where that's
Oh, no
going
kidding.
on. And my neighbors, it's right behind the house, they have nothing but good things to say about it. So I'm very
Fantastic.
happy with the
Awesome.
work, so.
Glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing. It's great.
Okay, item 7 is an update and recommendation relating to sidewalks.
I'll start that, but I'm going to ask Jonathan Owen to join us up here as well. For those who've not met Jonathan's been with us for, what, 2 years now? 2.5 years, and he is now our lead engineer of our capital project division here in the city, of the engineering division of public works, and which basically means he's the guy who's responsible for getting the plans done, checking them, and what goes on out in the field. So he's going to have some interaction on these projects here tonight. But the first thing is Code Section 909. What is that? It's a section in our code that governs the installation and then the maintenance of sidewalks. It's been over a decade since we've had any revisions to it. We've got a couple revisions that we're proposing for it. We just want to run them
This is
through.
in the spec sheet right here?
Yes,
Okay.
it would say fact sheet on it, correct. So in short, the first thing we are adding into the section 909 is we want to make sure that multifamily and commercial projects are also identified as being responsible for the maintenance of sidewalks. Right now, the way it's written, we talk a lot about a residential home being responsible. That responsibility lies with anyone, any property owner. So we're just further defining that this does include multifamily and commercial developments as well, to do the things like clean the leaves, rake the leaves, clear the ice, things like that. And when necessary, replace the sidewalk. The second part we're updating is the ADAG and PROWAG guidelines. That's the American with Disabilities Act and Public Right-of-Way Access Guidelines. That determines how sidewalks how wide they should be, what the slopes are, what's allowing differential vertical elevation. So we're making sure that our criteria for when a sidewalk's deficient matches the current requirements and guidelines. So there's some minor updates there. And then the third, probably the most significant one, is that we are updating the sidewalk code now to make sure that it's a good fit for when we talk about maintenance, so we can do individual properties. When we developed the last change, it was really with the Safe Walks program in mind to go do the entire city in a citywide effort. Well, that required a little different approach and a longer time frame. So we've adjusted the language to say that we can go out, identify repairs, make notifications to the property owners and tell them to do it. If they don't, we can go through the process of a resolution necessity, and that's where Jonathan's could talk a bit about that, where we will be with 2 projects, and then require them, compel them to make the repairs, or we will make those repairs and invoice them for the cost for that. So the code had to be changed a little bit in order to establish a little more liberal procedure to allow us to be a fit. It doesn't preclude us from still going back to, hey, we want to do Safe Walks version 2.0 and do the whole city again in 10 years. But what we're doing right now is we've gotten away from that. Very successful effort. Over 10,000 tripping hazards were repaired in that 10-year period. But now we're back to, we still have to do sidewalk maintenance on an annual basis. So the code is being adjusted in order to allow us to do it in a smaller scale and a more individualized, tailored approach. So those are the big changes we have in there. And I can answer any questions regarding any part of that. If there are tonight, we're going to ask for just a motion to recommend that the proposed ordinance changes be advanced to full council for additional consideration and adoption. That'd be the action request we'd have. So any questions on what we're proposing? It's pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah. So basically, it's just new language,
Yes,
so it doesn't just say residential, it's all property owners.
Correct.
Essentially is what it's about.
Correct.
Makes total sense to me, so. Do you want that recommendation right now on this one, or?
yes, because this
Yeah.
is a separate issue from the resolutions of necessity.
Okay, is there any motions for,
Yeah, I'll make a motion to forward the proposed resolution to
This
full
one would
city
actually be,
council for its review and approval.
this would be an ordinance
An ordinance, yeah, well, yeah.
because code.
okay, we got a motion by Mr. Hellinger, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Hoffman, roll please.
Mr. Hellinger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hoffman,
Yes.
Chairman Jones.
Yes.
Okay, the second part of this is, I think we actually have this listed as B, resolution necessity, and C. So this is what I was talking about. We have 2 actual capital projects we're proposing this year, and I'm going to let Jonathan address those and the needs.
Yes, Bill mentioned, we have 2 different programs this year for sidewalk maintenance. One of those is the downtown sidewalk maintenance program, and the other is just the general overall city program. And it does kind of resurrect the Safe Walks program that ended in 2017. We're taking an approach where The non-downtown areas, we identify sidewalks on the streets that were resurfaced the previous year for deficiencies that need repaired. So this year's program will be evaluating mainly streets that were resurfaced in 2019, as well as any general complaints that come in from the public about major deficiencies elsewhere. So each of those programs is currently budgeted at $150,000, 150 for downtown, 150 for the citywide. When we identify the deficiencies, we break it out into those areas that are property owner responsibility and then those areas that are city responsibility, and make a list and a cost estimate for making those repairs. So the $150,000 in each program is enough to cover both city responsible areas and private property owner responsible areas. And so the reason that we have a resolution of necessity is because we need to have something, well, it's a Ohio Revised Code and a city code requirement to basically state that a private property owner is responsible for making the repairs. And if you just look at the resolution, Section 1 does that. It states that. It gives a deadline of June 18th to make those repairs. And then Section 2 basically just says that the specifications for making the repairs and the cost estimate has been prepared and is on file with the city clerk. And that Section 3, perhaps the most important part of the resolution, is if the owners of the properties fail to make the repairs by the deadline, the city will do it at our expense and then assess the owners for the cost. And so attached to the resolution and the fact sheet are the specifications as well as a list of the specific properties and the noted deficiencies and an estimated cost for each property. And so you have two sets. You have one resolution and list of deficiencies for the overall sidewalk maintenance program, item 7B, and then you have a separate packet for the downtown areas. I handed out a revised version of the list for downtown at each of your chairs. If I put them in the right places. Looks like this. It should say 2020 downtown sidewalk maintenance program at the top. So that'll replace what is in your packet. And Elaine also passed out the fact sheets, which got missed from the packet. So, that being said, both programs come in a hair under the $150,000 budget for each of those. And our schedule is included in the fact sheet, which basically gives a deadline of July 18th for owners to make repairs. After that time, any repairs that are not made by the property owners will be repaired by the city through an overall contract. And then after those repairs are made, owners will be assessed for the
You're talking
cost.
about downtown, we're not talking about residential, we're talking about downtown, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about
The
one.
downtown maintenance program.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Well, I'm talking about both. So both programs, the downtown program and then the separate overall program, essentially both have the same schedule and very similar
So
resolution.
what we're talking about
processes.
is reinstituting the Safe Sidewalk program.
That's correct. We're bringing it, we went through a few years of not really doing sidewalk repairs. And like we said, things continue to deteriorate. So we're doing a annual safe walk program, but we're not doing a citywide, let's look at 2,000, 3,000 properties. We're really doing it, one is if a complaint comes in, it will go on our list and those people will get
Okay.
letters. And two is, once we go through and we resurface streets, like last year we resurfaced several streets, we're gonna go back in there now, since we made the investment to resurface the streets, we're gonna ask the residents to make the investment to fix the
So this is
sidewalks on those areas.
complaint-driven or,
Or paving program
okay,
driven.
we're not going out like we did before
No.
and marking sidewalks.
Correct, and that's the primary, there will be marks out there, but it won't be this global program.
Okay.
It'll be targeted towards where we've done pavement improvements or
complaint
complaint-driven.
Okay, I'm good with that.
And the downtown area will be limited to the areas that are streetscaped. So, Sandusky Street from Spring to Central, Winter, and William from Franklin to Union, and then actually Winter all the way out to Lake. So that is the downtown program. So any questions?
Any questions? Do you You need recommendation on, or motion on these as
Same
well?
thing, yep, to bring both these resolutions before council.
Is there a motion to do so?
I just have a question. Any idea how much this, like, you know, every sidewalk is different, but how much can this cost somebody? You know, all of a sudden they get a thing telling them that you gotta spend $1,000 to fix your sidewalk.
It's
And,
happened.
That's a good question.
I mean,
So probably the best place to look would be in the fact sheet for the overall program, you know, not the downtown one, but the other packet. List out various different properties, street addresses,
Okay,
and for each row, it gives an estimated cost for that property. And, you know, it looks like, you know, it ranges from, you know, $337 for a property to, I'm seeing maybe a high of $2,900 on the second sheet. There's one particular property that, you know, apparently had a lot of bad sidewalk that is $2,900.
That's just based on the length of it.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of properties that are in the $300 range. There's a few down below 300. But
Is that on there, like, is there like a basic, maybe what he's asking is like a basic square footage cost?
yeah, $13.50 per square foot is what we estimate for that.
I mean,
And,
'cause I'm just seeing a lot of people in my ward here. This is a lot of money. There's a lot.
Right, certainly. So maybe the reason those are concentrated in your ward is because, you know, those are the streets that are resurfaced.
Yeah.
So Cotswold, Lincoln, Hefner, Holly, North Union Street. North Union Street has a lot because, you know, a large part of Union was resurfaced. Somerset,
Yeah.
and several others.
A couple of things I'll mention too, Councilman Hoffman, is when we did the 10-year program, we came across this issue, and I gotta say, surprisingly, in 10 years, people understood the need and largely accepted it. There's two things that are important to know. One is there's an appeal process that's in the code, and if someone can come in and say, I really don't think my sidewalk needs to be repaired, comes before this committee, you make the
Yeah.
final judgment. The second is there's issues where there is hardship, and that's why there is the possibility is they can fix it, they can ask us to fix it, and maybe we get a better price to do it, and they pay it, or they can actually go to assessment, in which case then that cost is through their property taxes and is diminished in terms of an annual impact. Overall, there's an increase with a 7% administrative fee, but the impact isn't so high right away.
But when we did this the last time, there was a 10-year program, and how many sidewalks did we fix, you said?
Over 10,000 sections.
Sections, and I bet we had 25 appeals maybe?
Yeah,
Mhm.
All that?
very few. It was really widely accepted across all areas of the community.
Yeah.
Regardless of
All
income
forwards,
class,
yeah.
it was widely accepted. I think people they understand the idea of having safer sidewalks is a good thing. And we always did very well working with the various property owners when these situations came up.
And most of those were over the first ward because of the goofy trees we planted too
Right.
close to the sidewalk or caused the sidewalk to pop up.
And just so everybody's aware, good that you brought that up, part of what we take responsibility for and do not invoice or assess the owners are those locations where it's obvious that a tree root has
Okay.
uprooted and lifted up the sidewalk, so.
Any other questions? So is there a recommendation to, or a motion to recommend this resolution to go to city council?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Hellinger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hoffman,
Yes.
Chairman Jones.
Yes. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Last item is recommendation update regarding public works.
Yes, and this is actually, it's actually code section 901, right?
Correct?
Yes,
Am I wrong?
okay, yeah, no, that's right. I made sure Chris,
909 is sidewalks, right?
yeah, and this is
909 sidewalks, 901 is.
901.
right away.
Extra. Jonathan, if you'd stay in your seat too, please.
Not out of the hot seat
Well, he's
yet.
wearing a tie. We gotta
Yeah.
So, this is code section 901, it's another one we want to update. This is a little simpler. Code section 901 involves excavating and doing activities within our public right-of-way. well, we created this section of code probably 20 years ago, and updated it, and it works really well. It's what, it gives us the teeth, so when someone comes in and works on it right away, we can have control over that. We can invoice them for the costs of inspection and reviewing plans. We have a couple minor updates in the code that we need to put in. The first is just terminology. The right-of-way permit is what we call any activity now. We used to be called public way permit. Now we refer to it as right-of-way permit. So it's a terminology change that's in there. The second one is probably the most important one, and that's we're strengthening the code language on the process to go through for road, when someone wants to close a road, how they have to maintain traffic, and what kind of public notification process they have to
Close
give.
the road for like a block party or something? or-
No, this would be closed road for construction.
Oh,
A
okay.
good example is like Cheshire Street closed by Columbia Gas earlier this
Oh,
year.
yeah,
When they first approached us, they said, well, we're just gonna have this, it may take us a few weeks to get this work done. And we knew better, so we pumped the brakes on the whole thing. And turned out to be close to more than 2 months or 8 to 9 week closure with significant implications to the neighborhood, to school, to busing. But we really didn't have the code section to help guide us or guide the applicant. And we realized that, so Jonathan actually spent some considerable time writing separate policy, technical policy, that specifies, hey, if you're gonna close this level of road, we need to know what you're doing, this is the time frame to review it, this is the type of maintenance of traffic or detouring required, and you're responsible too for notifying the public when this is gonna happen. Too many times we get the complaints about what someone else is doing in the road, and the code didn't really give us the teeth for it. Now we're just adding that into it. So what we've actually done is, instead of trying to create pages of code, we simply took the language out that talked about maintenance of traffic, operations, and we turned it into policy. So this is so we can adapt that policy and change it as needed instead of having to go back and do code. So the code change really adopts what we call a technical name for it is our maintenance of traffic and public notification requirements for construction activities in the public right of way. A lot of words, but it really provides guidance as to when anyone comes in. I'm really talking mostly the large contractors, but what our expectations are as a community to take care of our streets and to make sure that we're giving ample notice and providing appropriate detours for our residents so they know how to get around. So that's what the big change is. The last section is just mimicking what we did with land development a year ago. We're taking out references to specific fees within the code, and we're referring them to section 19702. That's where fees are, and we're actually adjusting the fees for right-of-way to mimic what we did with land development, which in simplest terms is we're going to track your cost per month, our costs we incur, and we're going to bill you every month for those costs, and not do kind of the pre-estimations and things like that. So it's a simpler process.
This worked out well for us, hasn't it?
It's worked very well for us, with no complaints to date. We will run these code sections, both of these, just so you know, we're sending them to the BIA so they have their opportunity to look at it, as well as this section will go to our main utility providers, because it does impact them, and we'll invite them to the council session if they want, or they can write in comments if they have any. They're mostly used to working with these in all communities. We just don't have as strong a code section as other communities do, and we're just trying to beef our code section up. So if any questions about that, I can answer. I wanted,
Makes pretty easy sense to me.
yeah, and I don't know if you had any, there's a lot of language, you were provided this, and one of the questions I had, there's two things we need to do, is one, again, a motion to recommend this ordinance change to full council. The second question I had is, we have a lot of policies in the city, policy about where to put trash cans and policy about picking things up. It's not all code. And this is unlike the traffic calming policy that had high impact to every residence. This is more a technical policy. It can be included in engineering standards, or it can just be a policy that we have. I wanted to ask this committee if you're comfortable this being a city staff level, maybe a city manager authorized policy, not something that rises to, hey, we better bring this before full council and have public hearings on it. If you're comfortable with us just having the
I'm
policy.
100% comfortable with that.
Yeah,
It's-
absolutely.
It's administrative level, in my opinion, so.
Okay, perfect. Then in that case, any questions you have regarding maintenance of traffic operations or any changes?
I just have a kind of a associated question. So let's say we have utility provider, say Columbia Gas, while they did all their gas main repairs over the last couple of years, or what have you. So they come in, they get the permit, they excavate, let's say, in the middle of the road and do whatever they need to do. They put things back. And then we find 18 months from now that maybe they didn't backfill well. Something else happened, now we have a big divot in the middle of the road. Do we hold them liable for the correction of all those issues currently?
We can, yes,
But do we?
yes.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Columbia Gas is one example. We had an issue on, I want to say it was Fountain Avenue maybe, where we had work they had done partially, and then just abandoned it for the better part of a year, leaving a hole in a plate in the road. And the response we kept getting was, well, we're not sure if that work is really complete or not. Eventually we said, well, to us it is. Fix the road, come back, put the patches back in. If you have to tear it up again in the future, we understand, but it's our public right of way. The issue is really more with the small contractor that comes in and does work maybe for a small business or residence, because they may come in and leave town, hard to get them back. Columbia Gas, AEP, WOW, Verizon, they're here to stay. So if they want to continue to do business with us, they're going to fix mistakes, and we often have them make changes to ongoing work they're doing or come back and fix something because it wasn't to our satisfaction. But again, they're here, they're partners in the community, they're just as important as our water lines and sewer lines. So they're generally good to work with. It's the small guy that's hard to get back, but we will track people down and with whatever information or forensics we can do and try to get them back up here and hold them responsible.
Great, thank you, sir.
So you need a recommendation for the code sections then?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a recommendation to send the code section changes to city council for review?
I'll make that motion.
Motion, is there a second?
I second that.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. And
Thank you,
then,
Jonathan.
so C and D we're covered with then?
We haven't done the
Which one's D?
roadside
Memorial
Yeah,
policy.
that's a quick one. We started on a roadside memorial, if you read what's, roadside memorial is when things show up in a
Yep.
right of way, okay? They're difficult situations.
Yep.
But a couple things have changed with that. 2 years ago, we started to work through a process because we had one that just got put out there, ended up all in the road, and that's typically what happens is they end up out there, they're not always maintained. There's always a question if they shouldn't be out there. Well, recently, we have another one out there now, but recently, in talking with our attorney, there is actually a Supreme Court case that basically says, and at the council level, we can talk about this, he can refer to it, but basically says you gotta treat everybody the same on the roadside. So if you're running out realtor signs in the right of way, you gotta run out everybody the right of way. It's all or nothing. You can't pick and choose winners and losers who can express themselves in the public right of way. So that just makes the roadside memorial policy simple. You can't do it. Now, the reason we've slowed it down is because we understand it's an emotional situation for some folks. So in working with, over the past year with Ted Miller from Parks and Recreation, we said, let's offer something instead of just saying, get it out of the right of way. And we have this program now that they're gonna have a memorial tree planting program and a memorial tree kind of sculpture. You can permanently memorialize someone's name. So if a family wants to do that and as they grieve and lose, there's a better alternative to putting things out in the right of way. So we can adopt a policy that you can't do that, but here's what we can do for you as a city. And we can plant a tree in a public park. We can participate in this roadside, they call it like a memory tree sculpture, where all the leaves are individual people's names that for whatever reason are being memorialized by a family or a friend in that fashion. And there was a picture of what that could look like. Part of Assistant City Manager Kreider is working on the renovations to this building, and that's going to be incorporated within that, is adding that type of thing to it. There's a separate actual policy that Ted Miller is putting together that specifically shows what our memorial policy will be for those types of things. And so now it's appropriate to say, okay, well, let's bring these things together, because now we have an appropriate alternative to offer people. Instead of just saying, well, the law is you can't put it out there and leave them grieving, we can say, but we have a good program here in the city to help provide a permanent shade tree, bench, name on a plaque type of a thing for people.
So you're talking about when there's an unfortunate car wreck and there was a pole
Yeah.
and they put all that stuff.
Yep, it could be anything from just a picture.
You're never
to
gonna get,
a
you're never gonna get that to stop.
Yeah, and that's why the policy would say we can actually tell them stop, take it down, but then we can hand them and say, here's an appropriate way. You know, the right of way is not it's not Oak Grove Cemetery. There's a place for that, but we can also say, an understanding of the grieving they're going through is we can take the stuff down, give it back and say, here's a program that the city sponsors that may help you through the process.
yeah.
So, but what this would do, the policy would actually give us the teeth to go out there, and it just kind of writes down what we can do, which is you can't put things in a right of way, but we can say, we have a policy against it, but we also have a policy here to participate in the program.
So are you gonna draft a policy and bring it to council to talk
This
about?
is, yeah, I'll have an official policy, I want to run it through this,
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's a super idea.
yeah, and, but that's a policy that I think probably should have full council
Mhm.
opinion on. It's not really staff level, and probably just like the traffic calming, it's probably one that would recommend adopting by resolution, because it is significant and impacts the citizens in a different way.
Yeah. So then a technical question with regards to this. So, for instance, the memorial there at the railroad tracks on Pennsylvania. Now, is that actually, because it's right where the crossing gates are, it's within the railroad, is that actually, would that be actually within the road right away, or is that on railroad property, on our easement? What is it? I mean, just from a legal standpoint.
Where the railroad cuts through a road, typically that's the railroad's property. And we have an underlying easement to operate a roadway there, but railroad generally has the primary authority there. So the policy does say that you're allowed to do these things on private property if the private property owner allowed you to. So, for example, the current one out West Central, well, the private property happens to be the city, so it's
Right,
probably a bad
firehouse.
example. But if it's a private property, it said, yeah, you can tie it to my tree 20 feet back here, we're not gonna have say in that,
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't impact any of the public infrastructure. We're just talking about when they get out in the public right away, and we have to try to mow around them or operate our equipment around them.
Yeah, well, that's why I just didn't know,
Yeah.
because obviously it's kind of like in the road right away, but it's on railroad property because we go, that's why it's,
If it's public right away, it would apply to be, it can't be there, but if it's on private property, including a railroad property, the railroad probably wouldn't allow it either, but I guess, you know,
yeah, I mean, they have other things to do.
they've got tens of thousands of crossings to monitor. so.
Yeah, okay.
So I would ask then that we would maybe have a motion recommend we take this to a completed policy to full council for further consideration.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the memorial policy be forwarded to city council
Motion
for.
by Mr. Hellinger, is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Hoffman, roll call, please.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes,
Vice Chairman Hoffman?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes.
Did
Great.
we need, I'm sorry, did we need to do a motion for the maintenance and
I
traffic?
just have a question real quick.
Yes.
Sorry. Just, so basically the policy is there's not supposed to be stuff in the right of way.
Correct.
Anything.
Correct.
But this is more, really, we're going above board and by saying, we understand you have, this is a tough situation, here's an alternative.
Correct.
Right, because, someone could say, I could see people saying, well, that home builder's got his sign out there, and nobody took that out right away, or whatever.
Right.
But that wasn't supposed to be there either.
Right.
So,
That's exactly right. When we first started rewriting this, we started saying, well, should we give them 30 days or 60 days? And that's where, when it went to our attorney, he said, no, now the new court case is, if you're gonna allow that, you should be allowing realtors 30 to 60 days.
yeah,
So, so the compassion now, interjected now, is in offering an alternative.
yeah, okay.
And we don't allow signs, and our intention wouldn't be to necessarily go out there immediately and rip
Yeah.
something down. We would make contact with the family and
You
say,
generally know what happened.
Yeah.
You're able to
absolutely. And be compassionate about it.
You had a question?
Did we need to do a motion for item C?
No,
We did one for the codes,
that-
but not.
that
for
was,
policy.
the
was the staff
direction
level.
was to keep that as staff level.
Okay, but I
Policy.
didn't know if you wanted that as a motion, that's all I was checking.
Good. All right, awesome. Any further staff comments?
I just have, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
I have one quick update. There was a question floating out there, I forget from who, but it said about our refuse collection and senior discounts. And,
I don't think it was senior discounts, I think it was anybody who wanted to have a smaller trash can.
well, then there was a tagline about, don't we do that for seniors? So our code is for single senior citizens, they can have the small trash, they can have the 50% tax credit. Anybody else can have a smaller trash can, but they pay, there's not a discount associated with it. They still pay the full residential rate, which is $21.60, I think, a month right now. So there's not a break for a smaller trash can. The
Why would
break is
that
for
be?
senior citizens. What's that?
Why would that be?
That's how the code is written. The discounts were only for senior citizens. We don't have a by size category primarily because if we did that, we'd have a number of people wanting smaller trash cans and overflowing them on a weekly basis, and then would have to actually stop picking them up. So our policy now is we pick up basically anything that fits in that toter, even if there's a couple bags on top, we'll pick it up. But if we start going to the 64s or 32s and it's always overflowing, but they're paying less for the same amount of trash as the honest guy, then we end up with if we come
Well,
up
what's
with
going to prevent the senior citizen from doing that?
nothing, I see it happen.
Okay.
Most don't, but I do see that happen
Okay, so
too.
we're basically it's just a
Yeah.
golden bucket type discount.
It's exactly, most communities offer a senior discount,
Okay,
and so
Okay.
we've offered a senior discount for as long as
Okay.
I've been here.
it's like getting the senior coffee.
Yeah, there you go. Go to
Yep,
Mickey
yep.
D's. So then a follow-on question to that, with the automated toter, how much, because historically, my perception is as you drive around, yeah, there's probably something less than 10%, 5 to 8% of the people have secondary bags out. You know,
Yes.
they overflow their toters.
Yep.
So has that diminished at all, and/or has that negatively impacted the efficiencies of the automated toter program at all?
No, we're not, our drivers that are up our truck aren't seeing any real change in behavior, other than making sure nothing's around their toter. People who tend to throw 2 extra bags on top are still doing it. People who tend to be honest and buy the bag tags and set it next to it are still doing that. Hasn't really changed the culture of how people approach using refuse service. Still working really fairly
Good.
well.
Okay.
Anything else, Bill?
Nope.
Mike?
So I need to gauge this committee's interest because I received another phone call even today. The topic had been brought before council, I believe, a number of years ago, before my time, of electricity aggregation, citywide power aggregation. Is that something that this committee would be interested in being represented to them from a consultant, or from a provider, I should say?
Yeah, it is for me because I brought a consultant in for a presentation on that a few years ago, and it kind of, at the time, it kind of lost legs because of the levy, and we didn't want to put 2 things on the ballot at the same time. So from my perspective,
Well, we'd be falling in that trap again, I
Yeah.
think.
So my perspective, I'd like to get the conversation going
Okay.
again. I can't speak for the other gentleman.
Yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, I mean, it never hurts to look
Okay,
and see if it's viable or not.
I will,
Out of curiosity, who contacted you?
well, they threw your name out,
Okay,
so
that's
it was-
right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
it was Aspen.
Okay, I figured it
Yep,
was.
yeah.
Jay, whatever his name is.
I listened to the voicemail once.
Yeah, he came in, he did the presentation for us a few years ago.
Sure, okay. And I mean, I think in the last year and a half, I've talked to NOPEC as well.
Yeah.
And we had a number of meetings with them, and it came down to the fact of, we were given the impression that council was not leaning towards it at the time, especially if it was an opt-out program,
Yeah,
which is the only way they're gonna offer it, any of them. They're not gonna want an opt-in,
yeah.
so I can work on getting,
That'd be great.
okay,
You know, just as an ancillary to that, you know, in the past, different organizations, companies have contacted Tom with regards to solar.
oh, yeah.
And that can, I don't know where that stands again. And again, just purely from a community marketing standpoint. Yeah, I would love to see that on Cherry Street.
I've worked with 2 consultants since I've been here. I actually just sent some of the documents to Bill last week, as far as solar feasibility studies, especially based within our wastewater treatment plant
Yes.
footprint.
Yes.
It's a never-ending discussion, it seems. That is one of the reasons, so after that 5-minute recess slide that we never made it past last night, what you're gonna see is one of the goals within public utilities is to get us SolSmart certified. And if you don't know what SolSmart is, it is a program that is federally grant funded. So as long as you meet their criteria, you have to go through an approval process, they check the boxes, make sure you earn enough points, like LEED certification almost. You get free consulting services from them and so it's only solar-based. You know, we want to put out an RFQ for solar proposals. We review it, their legal team goes through it, they make sure that you're putting out the right thing. You get proposals back, they're going to look through them all, tell you the strengths and the weaknesses. So it's basically just a boon to communities who aren't going to have solar experts on their staff. So that's one thing we're working on within 2020 of getting certified so we can start using their federally funded services.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
that's where that wheel is rolling right now.
Good.
I received my most recent feasibility study for the treatment plant 3 months ago. So it's always there, it's always happening.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Good.
Back at that, I don't, there's something I want to bring up at council level at some point. I'm still getting all my ducks in a row, but I'd like to somehow see when we give these businesses abatements of some sort, tying in some sort of solar or some sort of renewable energy type, component to that abatement.
What's being abated?
You know, they're getting, no taxes for 15 years.
Gotcha.
Okay, understood.
You know, but that's a side note, just made me think of it, George brought that up, so.
Sure.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Member comments, Mr. Hellinger,
I'm,
all done?
yeah, I'm all done.
Mr. Hoffman?
No, nothing further.
Okay, I have one quick one, just curiosity. What's the feedback on the charging station across the street? Or is it getting used? We getting feedback? Do we got any,
Yeah, I thought there was a memo provided
if there was, I missed it.
In the-
I haven't seen it.
in the council packet.
Huh.
You didn't get it?
Didn't you get that memo?
Yeah, probably
Well,
not.
That one between the other
Yeah,
20?
which one?
I can provide you that,
I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, instead of going through the details tonight,
That's fine.
I'll provide that memo to the 3 members
Okay.
here, and it summarizes our experience so far with our solar array at Public Works and our charge point.
Oh, good, I missed that.
Good.
I'd like to see that. If
Okay.
you wouldn't mind resending that.
I'll get it to you.
Okay, great. Mrs. McCloskey, do you have anything for the good of the group?
No, I mean, I wish I did.
Yeah, okay, all right. All right, with that being said, it is 7:10, motion for adjournment,
So moved.
so be it. Thank you, everybody, great job.
Thank you.
All right. Get her done.
Yes.
Lot of work and a little bit of time.